Hello and welcome. This will be a series of videos getting started on React Native. Okay, so here I'm in the class syllabus page, and we previously did a couple lessons on Electron and developing apps with React and Electron. And in this section here, section 6 right here, lesson 6, we're going to start with React Native. So let's go over the learning objectives, right? So our learning objectives for today is to start a React Native app, use the list view, differentiate between the list and the scroll view, and then use a flat list, okay? So, let's talk about mobile environment, right? So, with React Native, you're going to be developing apps, truly native apps for Android and iOS, okay? So these will be apps that run on people's phones. I suppose they could run on the iPad too, but probably the phone. Let's talk about why you might want to create apps for the phone. Well, mobile traffic is up 222% over the last 7 years. 3.5 billion smartphone users worldwide. That is a huge audience, right? You could get your message out to a lot of people, right? 70% of YouTube traffic comes from mobile. 99.3% of internet users in China go online using their phones. So like China is like huge cell phone users, right? 70% of all media time is spent on phones, right? Average internet user checks their phone 58 times per day. That's terrible. Uh, but hey, if you wanted to get your message to them, you'd have 58 chances in a day, right? 56% of all internet traffic in 2019 was generated on mobile phones. So that's more than 50% of traffic is on phones alone, right? 66% of smartphone users are addicted to their phones. That's terrible, right? We spend 90% of media time on mobile devices in apps and 10% on the mobile web. So this is an interesting one because this is in apps, right? In apps, and 10% is on the web. So people prefer to use apps on their phone over searching the web, okay, or visiting websites on the phone, okay? So interesting, right? And with React Native, we'll be making truly native apps, not just websites that kind of look like an app, okay? And then it says 204 billion apps downloaded in 2019. You could be one of these. Might be lost in there, but maybe you can get your message out, right? Okay, so when you're approaching design on mobile, there's a couple like obvious things that need to be pointed out, right? Screens are smaller. That's the big thing, right? Your design is different, right? You can't plan things the same way, right? Text needs to be larger, right? The pixels on phones are really small, right? So that means like something 16 pixels on the phone is like a lot smaller than something that would be 16 pixels on your screen, right? Um, let's see, especially for old people, right? Like I'm old, my eyes are not as good as they used to be, right? So smaller screens also limit like how much you can show at one time. So on this screen here, in the browser, I actually have the text kind of zoomed in here, right? But you know, this is pretty big. Like I can fit a lot of stuff on here, but on my mobile phone, I can't fit as much stuff. People are scrolling, right? So mobile, the way that we use mobile phones is by scrolling the screen, right? Okay, so we got to always plan the information that we want to present around a scrolling, interface, okay? So also, interaction is weird, right? Your finger is the pointing device and it's large and awkward on a small screen. The computer here, like the desktop that I'm using, I have a very accurate pointing device. Like if you can see the arrow there, it's very small and it has a little arrow, with a little point on the top, and I can click anywhere where that, I could put the little pointer like right here and click on small things. Your finger is a lot harder to work with. Your finger is typically about 40 pixels, right? This cursor right here is 16 by 16. So your finger is more than twice the size of that cursor, and it covers the thing you're interacting with, right? So, a lot of times, like the thing that you're going to tap on, you see it first and then you put your finger over it and you can't see it anymore, right? So, interaction is a lot different on the phone. Also, if you imagine the phone, it has usually we have a row of buttons at the bottom and some buttons at the top. And if you've ever held the phone in well, you probably have, right? If you're holding the phone in your hand and you're using your thumb to tap the screen, actually that bottom row is a real awkward stretch for your thumb, and the top row is really hard to get to. On smaller phones in the past, like the iPhone 4, it wasn't as bad, but on the new phones, it's really kind of a stretch, right? So the way that we interact is totally different. Oftentimes we're using two fingers, right? Oftentimes we're changing the phone from landscape and portrait, like we're switching views. You never do that on your desktop, right? Okay, so you can read up more on designing for mobile devices here at the Human Interface Design Guide. This is a document put out by Apple, and it's kind of a guide for developing apps for the iPhone and the iPad. And they have one of these for desktop apps too. So read through this. They have a lot of information on how to use the UI elements that Apple provides. And we'll be using those same UI elements to build our apps. So they'll give you advice and they'll give you, best practices for those things. So take a few minutes and look at the human interface guidelines. Apple has been producing this for years. I used to have it in a book format like back in like early 2000, and they have it online now and they update it all the time. It's pretty good. Okay, so let's talk about the list view and the scroll view. So the scroll view allows you to scroll a small amount of content on the screen. Okay, imagine this like you have a picture that's too big to show on the screen and you need to scroll it. Scroll view is your perfect choice. Okay, the list view, on the other hand, is a scrolling list of objects. And what it does is it recycles the object and then repopulates it with information. So the difference here is the scroll view scrolls everything. So you have content and you're going to scroll all of that content. Okay. If you have a lot of content, this can bog down the computer and be less efficient. If you have a lot of content, then the scroll or the list view is much more efficient, right? So let me give you an example. Imagine you're on your phone and Steve Jobs famously said you could have 10,000 songs on your iPhone. I think he was talking about the iPad, or iPod, right? But imagine you have 10,000 songs, right? If I had to create a list with 10,000 rows, that would be a problem, right? The computer could run out of memory. You'd have all these rows. The computer would have to render them as you're scrolling them. The list view sidesteps this by creating a number of cells. Imagine each row in your song list is one cell with the name of the song and maybe the album picture and the length of the song or the artist name, right? Okay. And imagine you just have enough of those cells to fill the screen, right? So if maybe 10 of them fit on the screen. So what the computer does is it makes about 12. So it makes a couple extra at the top and bottom so as you move it, as one goes off the top, then a new one comes on the bottom. And what happens is the one on the top that scrolled off gets recycled and moved to the bottom of the list and then repopulated with new data. So in other words, the list view has a list of 10,000 data items, but a shorter list of actual objects that are displayed on the screen. And then it recycles the display objects and repopulates them with data from the data list. Okay, so it keeps a pointer to where it's at in the list and then recycles the data and just displays what you can see at the moment. Okay, so this makes it possible to scroll through thousands of items, where the scroll view is good if you have just a single item or a small amount of information. Okay, and actually the scroll view is used within the list view, so these components are used together. So why don't we get started with React Native? I have some information here, a little more on this, but you can read about that, right? on your own. So let's get started. So what we're going to do is we're going to build an app, and the app that we build is going to list some information about dog and cat breeds, okay? And the idea is, imagine that you were going to make an app that let people kind of browse through different breeds of dogs and cats and read about each of the breeds, and it'll provide information that rates the breeds in different categories, right? And what we're going to do is you're going to make an app for this, right? That'll scroll through all this data, and we'll also add some features where we can switch between cats and dogs, and we can display the information for each, okay? So anyway, so I'm going to stop the video here, and in the next video, we'll get started with React Native, okay?